We want to thank all of you for being here on today. As has been, my name is Starsky Wilson. I'm blessed and pleased with, along with Rich McClure, to serve as co-chair of the commission. It has been our kind of practice to begin with a period of invocation and then to have greetings from our host. And so today our invocation will come from Mr. Charles Davis of Burger Bar. They have been supportive and engaged in several of our meetings as we've needed sustenance. We've been pleased to support them. And then we'll have a welcome from Dr. Tom George, the Chancellor here at the University of Missouri St. Louis.
Hello, everyone. Can we bow? Our Heavenly Father, we come to you at this hour, being careful to give you all the praise and glory for all things. We know you are omnipresent because you are everywhere at the same time. We know you are omniscient because you are all-knowing. We know you are omnipotent because you are all-powerful and supreme. So we thank you for allowing us as a diverse group of people to come together and share different ideas and views on how to make a broken situation better. Lord, please open our heart and our minds as we discuss jobs, income, employment, business and entrepreneurship, housing and transportation. Help us to keep in mind that we exist on this earth for your glory and not for our own selfish wishes and desires. Lord, please bless this assembly and the Ferguson Committee as they strive to make changes in this system that we have. We say this prayer in our prayers. We ask that it come to you on the wings of faith. Amen.
Well, it's great to have the Ferguson Commission here, and I want to thank all the members of the Commission for all of the hard work and dedication that you've put into this particular appointment, which is critical for this area and beyond. We're glad you're here at the university. This is a big day for us in connection with things related to civil rights. The advisory board from Missouri to the Council on Civil Rights has been here all day meeting, and now we have the Ferguson Commission, so I couldn't be more pleased. I do apologize for all the capital construction that's going on, and I know it's a little difficult. I get lost myself sometimes on campus with all the buildings, but a year and a half, 2 years from now, it's going to be great. And that's always a sign of health. It's great to have all you here in the audience, and again, I want to thank the Commission for all that you've done. Thank you.
Again, we say thank you to Dr. George. We have been really blessed to have the support of the University of Missouri St. Louis. They have hosted several of our working group meetings, so some of you have been here for meetings in the past, and we continue to appreciate the wider support of our higher education community for our work and for all of you as we seek to kind of synthesize the best of our knowledge and learning in the community around some of these issues. As you may know, and we'll get a recap on our progress to date in a little bit, but I'll just frame for tonight. Tonight we begin our work around economic inequity and opportunity for our region. Tonight we will officially stand up and introduce. We are pleased that we have two co-chairs who have accepted the charge. I'll just quickly ask them to stand. Felicia Pulliam and Patrick Sly have committed to serve as co-chairs for our working group around economic inequity and opportunity. Pleased to have their perspectives very specifically with Felicia's work in the North County area and smaller municipalities, also as a resident growing up and living for a period in Ferguson. Also with Patrick Sly, of course, having Emerson being one of our leading corporate and philanthropic investors in the response and quite frankly across the continuum in some of the supports in our community. So we're very pleased to have their partnership leading the working group. As has been our practice, we'll have this open community engaged discussion, and then the working group will be sent forth with this information and leadership to carry out its charge. You will hear tonight about the charge and the work of the various committees as well. And we will speak to some of the activities of the commission since our last meeting on January 20th. One contextual note we'll make for those of you who have been to other meetings, it has been our practice to hold kind of an open mic period, which we will do again, and then to move into some small groups for the sake of engagement. We're going to make a little bit of a shift today because of some of the speakers that we have with us, and we want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to hear them before we go to our breakout groups. We will have the open mic period after we do a little bit of recap on where we have been in our meetings and the data that we have received. And then we're going to hear from our speakers, quite distinguished speakers who will share with us from various perspectives. We'll introduce them in a bit. And then we'll go forward into our breakout groups with that information resonating in our hearts and our minds. With that being said, as we transition, we will now you'll be in the hands of Ms. Rebecca Bennett, who will provide for us a little bit of context, do some audience polling so we know who's here, and then we will get some recap on where we were with educational inequity and child well-being in our last meeting. So you're now in the hands of Ms. Rebecca Bennett.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening. How many of you have had the opportunity to use an electronic keypad before? Okay, so many of you are familiar with this tool or this device. If you are not familiar with it, right, it gives you a series of options. You'll see that there are buttons. Those buttons have both numbers and letters on them. We will give you some questions that will be multiple choice. We will ask you to identify the response that most closely approximates your answer. So, and if it is number 1 or number 2, you'll simply push that button. Everybody with me? So we'll push the button. We'll do a practice exercise so that you'll get a chance to use the technology, and then we'll jump into our questions. I do want to say at the end of this experience, we're going to ask that you turn in your keypads. They will not open your garage doors. They will not change your television channel. We are responsible for them, and we have borrowed them, so we want to make sure that the number that we have distributed happens to be the number that we get back. So let us begin with the practice. So what is your favorite color? A, black, B, brown, C, blue, D, green, E, orange, F, purple, G, red, H, yellow, I, white, or J, other. So we ask that you push the answer that reflects your favorite color. Polling is now open. You'll see at the bottom where there's a green light. And you've got 25 seconds to push your answer or your response.
What you show on your little screen?
Well, right now you won't see anything that shows up. If you see a color or if you see something, do you see a number? Do you get anything?
I don't want to hit it again.
Well, it will simply cancel out whatever you did before. So it won't count your responses twice. All right, so in the room, blue is the favorite color. 30% of you have said that blue is your color of choice. Now that we have gone through the test experiment, let's go ahead and actually ask questions that help us understand a little bit who's in the room. We'd like to know a little bit about your demographic characteristics and whether or not you've been with us through the process. So, in what geographic area is your primary home or residence located? Is it A, St. Louis City, B, St. Louis County, C, St. Charles County, D, Jefferson County, E, Franklin County, F, St. Clair County, G, Madison County, H, Monroe County, or I, other? Polling is now open. You have 16 seconds. If you have not, push the button. Okay, so roughly 6 out of 10 of you are St. Louis County residents. And roughly 2 out of 10 are St. Louis City, with the rest of you dispersed in the other areas. In what geographic area is your primary work and or school located? Is it A, St. Louis City, B, St. Louis County, C, St. Charles County, D, Jefferson County, E, Franklin County, F, St. Clair County, Illinois, G, Madison County, Illinois, H, Monroe County, Illinois, or I, other? Polling is now open. You have 18 seconds. Okay, so roughly 5 out of 10 of you go to work or school in St. Louis County, and roughly 3 out of 10 of you go to work or school in St. Louis City. Let us continue. With which gender do you identify? We ask that you select only one: A, female; B, male; C, other; or D, decline. Interesting. So 5 out of 10 of you are women, and roughly 5 out of 10 are men. In the last 3 or 4 meetings, it's been 6 out of 10 have been women. So this is a more balanced group in terms of gender identification. Let us continue. How would you describe your ethnicity or race? A, white; B, black or African American; C, Hispanic, Latino, or of Spanish origin; D, Asian; E, American Indian or Alaskan Native; F, Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander; G, other; or H, decline. Polling is now open. If you have not received a keypad and you have just entered, I invite you to raise your hand. We have a wonderful helper who is passing out keypads. Very good. So 5 out of 10 of you identify as white, and roughly 4 out of 10 of you identify as African American, with the remaining percentages dispersed. Does everyone who needs a keypad now have one? Very good. Let us continue. In what age group do you belong? Please tell the truth. We can't tell what your answers are. This certainly is an anonymous exercise or activity. Are you A, 21 and under; B, 22 to 34 years of age; C, 35 to 44 years; D, 45 to 54 years; E, 55 to 64 years; F, 65 and older; or G, you decline. Polling is now open. Did I hear decline? Okay, so this is also a departure from what we've seen recently. The largest group of you are between 55 and 64, so 1 out of 3 of you roughly, with some fairly even representation between 22 and 54 years of age. Let us continue. It's almost evenly dispersed between 25 up to 64. So you'll see that when I recap from the last meeting. This is the 6th meeting of the Ferguson Commission. How many previous meetings have you attended? Is it A, none; B, 1; C, 2; D, 3; E, 4; or F, 5?
Distinguishing general meetings and work group meetings?
Yes, so I'm only asking Ferguson Commission meetings, not work group meetings. So roughly half of you have not attended a meeting before, but a quarter of you have attended 1 meeting. And then roughly a quarter of you have attended 2 or more meetings. So about half of you have attended at least 1 meeting, and roughly 25% of you 2 or more. Fantastic. That concludes our keypad polling. Oh, we have one more? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Of the choices below, which three are most important to address in creating access to opportunities? Which three? So this means we're going to ask that you push 3 responses this time. A, employment and income. B, job skills and training. C, entrepreneurship and small business growth. D, health and wellness. E, housing. Or F, transportation. Which 3 are most important to address in creating access to opportunities? Polling is now open. So the top 3 are job skills and training, employment and income, and transportation, though it's very close split with health and wellness and housing. So that tells us that those are all very important to you. We will get an opportunity later in the evening to explore in more detail your priorities and what is important, what are the issues, and what are the desired improvements in each of these areas. So we thank you so much for participating in the keypad polling. And we're now going to collect the keypads. So our promise to you is always that whatever information you give to us, whatever input or insight that you provide, we will always capture that, document that, and that we will use it to help inform our thinking and frame our decision-making. And to that end, we're also transparent about what it is that we have heard. And so you'll notice that at each meeting, we tend to do a recap of what came out of the preceding meeting in terms of the public's insights and input, and we are going to do the same this evening. So you'll recall that on January 20th, we had the 5th Ferguson Commission meeting, and its focus was on education and child well-being. And so I'd like to take the next couple of minutes to go through the discussion findings and highlights that came from our participants. So you all just finished keypad polling, so I get to tell you who was at the last meeting. When we asked about where people resided, 65%, or roughly 2 out of 3, sort of close to that, were St. Louis County residents, and roughly 1 out of 3 were St. Louis City residents. Nearly 6 out of 10 worked or went to school in St. Louis County, with roughly 3 out of 10 working or going to school in St. Louis City. 6 out of 10 attendees were women. 6 out of 10 attendees were African American at the last meeting that we had on education and child well-being, or identified as African American. Our attendees were generously dispersed across all age groups, 22 and older, so you'll see that roughly 25% were 22 to 34, 22% were 55 to 64, 21% were 35 to 44. So really, we had good representation there. Roughly 4 out of 10 had attended at least one commission meeting, and roughly 20% had attended at least 2 commission meetings or more. So those were that's a recap of what came out of the polling from the last meeting. But what came out of the discussions, we had two places where we sought public input. One is in the public open mic, which we'll do once we have concluded with this. And then the other was in the small group discussions. And we held two types of small groups, or two small groups focused on different issues. One was focused on education issues, and the other was focused more broadly on child well-being issues. With regard to the public open mic comments, we heard a lot about education funding, education in poverty, model programs, and then teachers and the school-to-prison pipeline. With regard to funding, we heard the districts were severely underfunded, that equity efforts were limited because of lack of resources, and that there need to be changes in the way that districts get financed so that those that are really serving some populations that are most in need really have the resources to do the heavy lifting. With regard to education and poverty, we heard that education and child well-being not only address poverty, but a whole other series of social ills and social issues. So they're really fundamental, and they need to be focused on and given the priority that they are due, given that the outcomes of not having adequate education or educational attainment and the outcomes of not protecting and ensuring the well-being of our children are experienced over a lifetime. We heard that fairness in education is the #1 priority because many people saw education as really an opportunity for experiencing economic mobility and being able to leave poverty, and we'll hear some more about that this evening. And in that context, it was considered to be really important. We heard a number of people who spoke to us about sort of model programs, and they talked about Teach for America, or they talked about St. Louis Community College, or they talked about local youth programs that were really working with young people, young athletes, young students. And so we know that there are things that are working in our community. And then we also heard that there were some, in terms of teachers and what happens inside the classroom, we heard that there were some big disparities in teachers' experience and education levels across districts, and so not all children are necessarily getting exposure to excellent teachers. And we heard that we really need to focus and address on the school-to-prison pipeline and what happens when our children are not in environments where they are learning well or where their learning is compromised, and what are the consequences of that. So, that was from the open mic. In the small groups, the insights that we got around education, we asked a couple of questions. The first was, what concerns do you have about education in our region? Big question, so that we could get lots of answers. We didn't want to filter out. And there were 5 concerns that came up as the sort of main concerns. Also, if you are interested in a deeper dive, if you go to the Commission's website, the actual reports with all of the comments are actually online for you to be able to review or download for every meeting up through the 5th meeting. But we heard family and community responsibility is important, so part of educational success has to do with what happens outside of the school, right? And we heard there are not enough activities for youth, that parents aren't as involved or engaged as many would like, and young people aren't having, or adults aren't having the same kind of high expectations for youth that are needed. We heard about unequal schools and unequal outcomes, so that there isn't enough funding. We just talked about that earlier. And that a focus on the basics actually undermines youth development when that's all we focus on, that young people need well-rounded stimuli and not just the basics. We heard, again, about the school-to-prison pipeline is certainly a key issue, that neighborhoods and schools that aren't adequately resourced and that are socially isolated really prepare children for prison. We heard about a lack of accountability. Is the state investing in what matters most to us, which is education? And who's held accountable for educational failure? How do we disperse responsibility for that? And then safety. We heard a lot about children's experiencing danger going to and from school. So that needed to be a priority and a focus for us. Let us continue. With regard to improvements, we asked the second question. Well, you told us what the issues are and what the problems are. Now tell us, what actions do you suggest we take to improve education and student outcomes? And there were 5 that rose to the top, although they were an array bigger than 5. We heard parental involvement. We've got to train and support our parents. They are our children's first teachers and are meaningful, or can be meaningful, longitudinal relationships with those. So parents with children over a long period of time. We heard about programs such as funding for parents as teachers and the funding that got cut and needing to improve that. We heard about the village, right? It takes a village to raise a child. So we heard about village interventions. Can we get community members to volunteer, both in and out of school? Can we get them to mentor our children? And that's a key piece of the solution. We heard about the need for more youth programs, so other than sports, but also that there are a lot of programs out there that many of us just aren't aware of. So how can we raise awareness about what does exist so that we can access it? We heard about empowered students, that part of what's right with our young people is their ability to influence and tell us what they need, and their ability to not only advocate for themselves, but to take empowered action. And to do that, they need good civic education, and we also need to be in the business of engaging them on a regular basis in our decision-making and in our thinking. And in our solution, our work to identify solutions. And then we heard about legislative action, that we really need legislation that advances equal access to funding and quality education in our region. Let's continue. So we had small groups that also focused on child well-being, and interestingly enough, we asked, what concerns do you have about the well-being of our children and youth in our region? And not surprisingly, a good piece of what came out of the child well-being focus was still on education. So I would say at least half of the issues that rose to the top in that conversation were still education-oriented. Safety came up again, which is not a surprise, but our young people are surrounded by neighborhood and community violence, gangs, guns, lack of guidance, bullying, and fighting are all things that people are concerned about in terms of the well-being of our children. We also heard about primary and secondary education and higher education. So cuts in school funding and the lack of cultural diversity among educators or leaders, educational leaders, differences in school quality all came up with regard to primary and secondary education. When we looked at higher education, what really rose is that we're not graduating as many students as we'd like to see from community college system and even from other kinds of systems or programs, and that students have to indebt themselves to be able to get the credentials that they need to do well, and that's a major issue. But we were told that we need to be mindful that people go to school for a variety of reasons, and that the end of that may not be a degree. It may be something else. It may be a certificate, or it may be other things. So we need to be mindful. The last issue that really came up was the lack of transparency. So there was a concern that we don't know how funding is determined, and how do we figure out what's fair, that there's school closings and these decisions that are happening, and we don't know how those decisions are made, and we don't feel adequately involved in them, and there's a consequence to the community. And generally speaking, we would like to be more involved in educational decision-making as a community. Advance, please. So then we asked, okay, so now we know the problems. Tell us what actions you would suggest we take to improve the well-being of our children and youth. And again, the top 5 that rose, the top 2, as you can see, are still school-related, right? So schools, teachers, and curriculum. We want higher experienced teachers. We want to reduce class sizes. We want to focus on something other than the basics, right? So not things that we haven't heard before, but certainly things that are considered to be important and need to be practiced with greater consistency and quality. With regard to students, we heard that a number of our children are suffering from trauma and stress, and that we need mental health supports and interventions. We need wraparound services so that they are able to sufficiently focus and learn. We heard that there needs to be more support for parental involvement, that parents need propping up too, not just children. And then again, the issue of safety and guidance and supervision came up, and so how do we have more neighborhood watches, more block monitors? How do we train role models and mentors to really be able to step in and supplement what parents are doing? And then community programming in general is important both before and after school, because schools can't do it all. So that's what we heard from you. We really appreciate your insight tonight. We look forward to doing something similar once we move into our small groups. We will go ahead and take all of that information, and then in the next meeting, you can expect to see a report out. Thank you so much for your attention.
Good evening. My name is Lorna Godwin, and I am going to lead you through the public open mic portion of our program this evening. And for those of you who have been here before, that means that if I pick your name out of our fishbowl, then you get 2 minutes to come up and address the commission. I am going to turn this podium around because you are indeed addressing the commission. And I will be here with a timer, and I walked over here without my fishbowl. So I'm going to call the first 3 names so you can be prepared. First speaking will be Mary Woods. So Mary, you can start coming forward. Then Clifton Kinney. And Ruth Meyer.
Good evening, everyone. I am Mary Woods. I'm with the Quality Home Care Council for Missouri. We've been working with a board in Jefferson City. We've gotten a contract for the home care workers. I guess you all know what home care workers are. Okay, we're trying to get a raise for them in their salary because they don't make a living wage. And I'm just here to let people know, let you know that this is a fight. We're not getting Jay Nixon's attention in this thing. He seems not to take us seriously. So all the knowledge that we can spread, and the more people that know can get on our bandwagon when we do the calling and the letter writing and all of the things that we're doing to get this implemented, maybe more people can participate with us. Okay, and that was basically what I came for. Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you, Mary. Clifton?
Nice to see you. Hello, Clifton Kinney, community activist. The problem in St. Louis has become far deeper than just policing. Poverty has become a chokehold on the American dream. Although we praise the economic recovery and the low unemployment rate, honestly, the recovery has not been felt by many of the African American community. In fact, it seems as if it has passed them by. In Ferguson and overall St. Louis, for far too long it has been the practice that policies are created to benefit only a select few rather than an unprivileged majority. In earlier meetings, I spoke of a tale of two cities. When it comes to the economy in St. Louis, it has become a tale of two wallets, one fat and full of influence, the other empty and unheard. Because I was a child who was raised under the poverty line, my mother, my late mother, knew how to stretch a dollar. If it weren't for the social safety net, my mother wouldn't have been able to care for her children while battling stage 4 breast cancer. And by the way, Missouri should really expand Medicaid. I mean, really, it's 2015. No one should really have to fear for their health because they can't afford health care. But when will the time for stretching the dollar come to an end? When will there be policies that seek to build up the community rather than tear it down like eminent domain? Instead of a war on poverty, it has become a war on the people who live in poverty themselves. Instead of targeting foreign countries and black lives, there needs to be a war waged on inequality and inequity. As much as we invest in police and military equipment for police, we should really invest in youth programs, homeless reduction, business, and infrastructure. If we can't do that for the generations now, can we at least do it for our kids and the continuous generations? As our thoughts and actions change, our world changes. We have the ability to create a beautiful world with beautiful thoughts and actions. The movement lives. Clifton Kinney.
Thank you, Clifton. Yep. Ruth Meyer's about to come up, and while she's coming up, after Ruth will be Daniel Polk. Is Daniel still here? Danielle? Great. Hakeem Mitchell? Derek Laney? I could tell you were hoping, you were keeping your fingers crossed. There you go, Ruth.
Okay. I would like the Economic Development Working Group to focus on Missouri Chapter 353, Corporate Tax Abatements and TIFs, which are tax increment financing municipal bonds. They have a tremendous impact. We're talking about many, many, many millions of dollars. My preliminary research has supported what others have said to me, which is a drastic underassessment of corporate wealth, the indenturement of municipal government to corporate development, the unequal allocation of risk and benefit between municipalities, and the improvement of the districts they contain. If we don't deal with that, then poverty will increase, educational opportunities will not come available, We need to talk about where is the money coming and not coming from to finance the essential components of our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. Danielle?
Hi, my name is Danielle Polk. I'm here with the Show Me 15 committee and a union. And I'm one of your young ladies that works at the Ferguson McDonald's in the middle of Ferguson on West Florissant, 9131 West Florissant. I was actually one of the individuals that was affected when the Mike Brown incident happened, okay? I had to walk 2.5 hours to get to work because I didn't have any money. I couldn't pay my electric bill. I couldn't pay my gas bill, nor my rent, okay? When I saw my paycheck, it was less than $100, and I have a newborn, okay? When I first had my newborn, I had to leave off of paternity leave in 2 weeks. I couldn't stay with my daughter. Now, I have to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning to drag my daughter outside in this miserable weather right now. She's only 6 months. She doesn't even know what's going on in this world. I'm doing my best as a woman to stand up on my 2 feet and be strong for my family. All I'm asking is for you ladies and gentlemen to give us an opportunity to show you the reason why we deserve $15 an hour. A lot of us don't have it. We're struggling, and we're struggling hard. Because I was also one of them people that had to wake up on Christmas, 2014, and Thanksgiving, and tell my kids, I can't give you anything, but I may have a meal to give you because I'm on welfare. Welfare is $234 a month. I need Pampers. I need wipes. My daughter's I'm about to be 7 months, and I'm just now buying her a crib. Not from Walmart, not from Target, not from Brotherton. I'm buying her a crib from the thrift store that has been handed down. Okay? I just want to give my daughter an equal opportunity, okay, that I didn't get a chance to have. With my $7.80 that I get paid now, that goes on diapers and wipes. A pack of diapers is $36 before tax. 7 times 7 is 49. Okay? Take that $7.80 and do the math. 1 day, 5 hours. All I get, 5 hours at work. Maybe 3 days a week. That's only 49, that's $35. 7 times 5. And my paycheck is not enough. Today, I owe rent. I'm behind. I don't know what I'm going to do. How much do you? I owe $300 and something dollars.
We'll take care of it, okay? We'll take care of it.
I'm sorry. I did hurt from this because I come from a family that didn't have. I'm not, you guys look at me, I'm not African American. I'm part African American. My life has been very segregated because I am a biracial female. My mother is white, my dad's black. I'm one of them people that had to grow up in that. And I'm trying to show my daughter the positive things. And I can't do it. When my manager told me today, I called in and I said, I have a personal issue I have to deal with, and I'm not able to come in. She told me, well, you're steady calling off.
Well, Saturday I had to call off because why? I dug in my pockets. I didn't have no money for a babysitter. So I had to dig deeper into a hole that I have, that I'm in, so that someone can watch my daughter. Almost a month ago, my manager tried to take my daughter from me because he filed false allegations against me on my daughter, saying that I left her at home. No, that would never happen. No, that's all I have. I have no mother to lean on. I have no father. I have no grandparents. It's just me, and I'm trying. I don't want to see my daughter in foster care because I didn't have parents that gave a care about me. But I'm trying to break that chain, everyone. And that $7.80 is not going to do it. When you have a powerful person that's trying to stand and trying to make something of themselves, there's always that negativity that wants to knock you down like you don't mean nothing. I've been working for McDonald's 11 years. 11. I'm about to be 27. I started at 16. I'm only a crew person. I know McDonald's like the back of my hand. You can put me in any position. My customers is the 3 most valuable things that I go to work for. Actually 4. Number 1, put a smile on your face. Because I know you might have a bad day, but meeting me, I can turn your day around. 2, you mean so much to me. You guys are quality. Okay, so I have to give you quality. 3, I do my best to make you guys come into a restaurant that's clean, that's healthy, that provides you guys. Now, all I'm asking for you guys to do is just to give me an opportunity to make $15 an hour to show you guys the reason why I needed it and the reason why I'm coming here today. And I'm reaching out and I'm asking you guys, please don't let it be another mother like me. Please. These babies are harmless. They don't have anything. They can't think or do for themselves. Please. I'm begging for $15 an hour. It's not that much more. Please. Please. That's all I'm asking for.
Thank you, Danielle.
Danielle, thank you.
My name is Hakeem Mitchell.
Hold on, Hakeem. Danielle, I want to thank you for your powerful sacrifice for your family and for the power of you sharing your story and the difficulty that takes, the power and strength that takes to help some of us in the room know that this is more than an academic discussion. So people need to understand that. I thank you for sharing your story because someone needed to hear it. And our commitment is to continue to share your story, Danielle. Thank you. We love you. And we will not let you down.
Right. Okay, I'm gonna try to be brief. Like Danielle, I'm gonna tell a real quick testimony of my story. I did 10 years in prison. I came home in 2006. I started an organization called ACOP in 2008, assisting children of prison parents. And in 2009, after being discouraged and knocked down by St. Louis and trying my hardest to keep this program alive, I was about to ready to give up, but what happened to us, a 14-month-old baby girl, she was murdered on March 9th of 2009. And she was left at home because her mom had to go to work and left her home with a boyfriend that she really didn't know, but she didn't have a choice. She had to leave him there because she had to work. Leave her there when she had to work. So when she came home the next morning, he had murdered her child. He was only 19 years old. We don't know at this point, I don't exactly know why he did it. I don't think they know why he did it. And he had no drugs, alcohol in his system.
So the only reason I say that is because I advocate for those children. I advocate for children who have a mom who has to work and who dad may be incarcerated or dad may be on drugs. So I advocate for those children, and my thoughts and my way of thinking to solve the problem is actually community organizations. Put the right finances and funds in community organizations that's reaching to children and working with the children, like my organization. We're working with the children, and the children are having more of an impact now because they see someone care. And I know all you guys heard the saying that no one cares what you know until they know that you care. When these children know that you care, they start to believe again. I think our children have lost hope and they stop believing, as well as some adults as well. So I believe that the decision should be into community organizations and not-for-profit programs. Okay?
Thank you. And after Derek will be Bill Monroe, Kaylin Smith. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Derek Laney. I'm with Moore, member of OBS. Thank you, Danielle, for your powerful story. I think that is really important that we hear those kinds of stories, and I thank you, Reverend Starsky, for pointing out that that is what moves people, those stories, that this is a real life experience for many, many people. It's beyond academic, it's beyond punditry. So I'm here to talk to you guys about the economic situation in St. Louis, and specifically talk about what one aspect of our society can do, the Federal Reserve Bank, and its potential to use federal policy to help the situation in St. Louis with wages, with employment, and specifically what Sister Danielle was talking about with $7 and some odd cents an hour is not enough for anybody to live off of. The Federal Reserve Bank is a very powerful institution that controls the economy of the U.S. and hence the economy of the world, has many, many opportunities to do things in terms of monetary policy, to increase jobs, increase wages by keeping the interest rates low. But the Federal Reserve Bank also has the power to do things like introduce low-income loans to municipalities, to other entities, and the commission has an opportunity to use your influence, and Mr. Boshara, I think, should be here somewhere from the Federal Reserve, use your influence to encourage the Federal Reserve to use its policymaking and its bond issuing power in a way that is unconventional, but that can be very impactful on the community to serve us in ways that are very needed. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Monroe.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm one of the guys that has been here to every meeting. My face is familiar to everybody here. And the reason I'm here is the same, and I'm glad to get this opportunity to speak. One of the most embarrassing moments that I experienced recently, about 6 months ago, was when I was handing an RFP from Normandy to help produce a school. This would be my second school, Harriet Tubman. I'm the founder of Thurgood Marshall, a former charter school. And it was embarrassing because when they gave me this RFP, I couldn't find a bank, a lending institution to help me. And it takes money to educate. I'm talking about educating black boys. I'm talking about my target, the ones that we see going down the street with their pants hanging down next to their ankles, the ones that are doing drive-bys, the ones that have no skills and no education. We can do something for them. If we can send people to the moon and Mars, surely we can create curriculum that will assist and help our children. But like so many things involving race, those of us in this community, African Americans, do not have access to the funding to create the institutions that can help our children. And that is a huge, huge, huge difference in what happens to white men and white women who seek to finance charter schools and other things. So the issue has to do with race. Race, I'm a former policeman too, so I know what's going on in these streets. And I weep sometimes when I go down in the area and I see our people with nothing. We own nothing. We don't own service stations. We have nothing to do. The Department of Education has failed our children. They have failed us. And we must stand and educate our own. I'm talking to the black people in this community. You got to get involved with educating your own. Thank you.
You're welcome. After Kaylin Smith, Peggy Fall, I think great, Peggy, and then after Peggy, Scott Addison. Scott, raise your hand. Oh, okay, great.
Well, like she said, I'm Kaylin Smith. Just like Danielle, I am with Show Me 15 organization in the union. Due to the Ferguson incident, my job has actually been closed down, and I work at Toys R Us on West Florissant. We were hit 2 times, and as everyone knows, Toys R Us don't get very much business through the year other than Christmas. And since we were hit 2 times, we had to repair twice, which put us in low funding budget. And now we have 1 day a week on the schedule. I'm only 18, and I'm getting ready to go off to college, and it's very hard to buy college things with, 1 day a week on a schedule, which is $27. So we're asking for 15 in the union because we need a living wage. We make $7.25 starting at Toys R Us, and we work very hard, especially to put the store back together after the Ferguson incident. We had busted windows. We were cleaning glass. I was actually cut on the job and had to go to the hospital cleaning up the glass from the mess that I didn't even make. But hopefully you guys can help out with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Peggy?
I'm Peggy Fall from Ferguson. I work for the Ferguson Florissant School District in the Parents as Teachers program, so I was very glad to see us mentioned up there, and hopefully, apparently tomorrow they're going to vote on a bill to put some more money back into PAT. As the young girls just spoke, that's what I'm here to talk about. Our city, our destruction of our city. It's not just the windows that are out. These people have lost jobs, the businesses have lost, and I guess we're all getting pretty tired. And I hate to hear about all the money being spent on different things, and yet insurances and the businesses there have not been put back together. So I guess I want to put a fire under everybody's butt and get moving and get the city back to work. Thanks.
Thank you, Peggy. And I'm going to take the last 2 since we're on time. Walter McKinney? Is Walter here? I'm Walter. Okay, right after Mr. Addison, you'll speak. And then Mr. Miller? I know you're here.
Good evening. Name is Scotty Addison. I'm most infamous for wrangling people on civil rights issues, and I have some brief things to address in that regard here, and then I want to talk a little bit about community economic development, because that's my real gig. I'm a planner. Friday, this news item showed up on the Post-Dispatch. "It's a real disgrace" is the headline, and it's about a business owner who was wondering why, with the massive deployment of police in November on that fateful night, facing off unarmed protesters, his business got taken down and lost, he says, about 75% of his business. And the problem is that this debate is kind of displaced in trying to blame the governor, who haplessly was claiming that the unified command scheme was going to protect lives. That's a red herring answer, because unarmed protesters were not going to propose a threat to lives. So it was a pretty easy decision, a sensible, tactical decision, to deploy police in blue on these arterials to keep a watch, but that's not what they did. They were there to create a standoff with protesters and a confrontation which was entirely unnecessary. And so the governor really needs to look to the guys who assured him that this unified command scheme was going to work. I'm not a big fan of incident command, because We've seen what they do elsewhere in suppressing speech. We call them the incident creation team. And yeah, well, I'm going to move on because this story ain't over. And with regard to the community development stuff, I have other correspondence to the commission talked about the North County as a post-suburban landscape. And it grew up at a time when there was ample industrial jobs and incomes to support this kind of wasteful, like sprawl development, which now is unsupportable. And we really need to look at North County as a post-suburban and post-industrial landscape. My specialty is about looking at regenerating value-added jobs, rehabilitating industrial sites, finding ways to put people back to productive work, and rather than treating them as a demographic for the benefit of retail stores and malls with declining income to support them. The problem, my uncle said something one time, the reason people are poor is that they have no money. And that comes, well, yeah, and what it comes down to is unless people have a way of making a living and doing work with and for each other, we're just blowing smoke. When I was 19 years old, one sentence. I proposed, I came out of an internship on the Hill in New Haven, and I proposed community development banking. This was before the Community Reinvestment Act.
That was one sentence.
Yep, well, I'll be done now. But that's what I'm going to call for. And I'm also going to call for community land trusts so people can own their homes.
Mr. Miller? There's two Mr. Millers, the other one and then you. McKinney, I'm sorry, Mr. McKinney.
Board members, thanks for having me this evening. It's great to see you again, sir. Mr. Isom, great to see you. My name is Walter McKinney, Jr. I just wanted to talk to the commission. It's my first meeting. I've been a financial advisor for 15 years, and I've been running my own practice since 2005. So, since 2009, rather. And I get the opportunity to see things at ground level. And when you know that the average African-American family has a net worth of about $5,647 versus roughly $135,000 for a Caucasian family, 35 times more, you get to see what it's like at the ground level. And it's only one problem, and I think we have two. The first thing I would like to see, I was a Marine also for more than 20 years in my first life. I'm on my second. In the first life, I understood one thing. Unless leadership acknowledges there is a problem, and I haven't heard that yet. No one has said we have a race problem here in Missouri. No one has said it. I think whenever I was a combat operations officer, chief rather, we had to acknowledge that there was a problem. If there's no ammo, you need to say it. You need to own it, and you need to change it. And then you have a responsibility. I've heard more about the Constitution in Missouri than anywhere else I've been in the world. 20 plus countries, probably 40 cities, here more than any place. But we don't practice it. And I don't understand why we don't have the will and the intestinal fortitude to expand opportunity. I listened to the news this evening. They said we're going to try to find the hot spots for crime. Just simply look at where you haven't expanded opportunity. That will be what we call the tip of the spear. That will be the focus of main effort when you look at a Marine. What is the focus of main effort? What is our phone? And we have to decide that. And if you don't know, this city is dying. And I know process. And without the expansion of opportunity, there is no life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And we have to expand it to everyone. Everyone who will. Thomas Jefferson was clear. The Constitution is clear. Not the people just look like us, to people who ever will that do not look like us. That is what we are charged with as the citizenry of this great union. And leadership needs to know that. And I don't know if we do, but we need to know it and we need to own it. 46 years ago, I was picking cotton in Braggadocio, Missouri. And now I run one of the largest African-American owned firms in this state. So 2 things are important. Let's lead from the front.
Thank you. And our last speaker is Mr. Miller, and there was a mention of how we need to address race, and that is the next topic for the Ferguson Commission next Monday night, March 2nd, at the Missouri Historical Society, the museum, 5 to 8:30. It's on race and race relations. Yes. Well, it's the Missouri Historical Society. That's the official title, but it's the Missouri History Museum. Go ahead, Mr. Miller.
Yeah, the first meeting I was 3 minutes, now it's down to 2 minutes, and I've been out of the country, so maybe next time it'll be 30 seconds. But anyway, I just want to bring everyone's attention to this President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing. And you guys have a colleague here that's probably in Washington, D.C. right now. Otherwise, she'd be here. So apparently she doesn't have access to one of President Obama's fleet of 5 747s. But maybe she could have brought in a Hornet, which we build right here in St. Louis, but I'm talking about packing it from the, okay. And then the other, I don't have enough time, so I hope everyone has read this article, Hard Truths, Law Enforcement and Race, which was a talk given just like a week ago at Georgetown University by the director of the FBI. I don't think they're looking for me, but here, one of the truths is, and we're talking about it now, much research points to the widespread existence of unconscious bias. Many people in our white majority culture have unconscious racial biases and react differently to a white face than a black face. That's what I call racism. And I've been around too damn long, 78 years, and I lived through the Detroit riots, and I told you people, read the Detroit riots, the Kerner Commission, a great big book, and we've got the same problems today as we had what? Then. We need evolutionary change, not evolutionary change, we need revolutionary change. And I hope that's what President Obama comes up with when he initiates this weekend. And March 3 is the deadline. You guys have 9 months or a year. And then lastly, one other article here, which I think shows what the demonstrations here in Normandy have brought about. Read this article too. Unlikely cause unites the left and the right. Justice reform. Please read this. Please read this. This just came out a day or two ago in the New York Times. Unlikely cause. And here's where they're talking about the Koch brothers. KOCH, those mega billionaires, now concerned about racial riots and the race instance. Usually bitter adversaries, Koch brothers, the liberals, the conservatives, and the Center for American Progress have at least finally come together and said we're going to talk about these racial issues. And they have $5 million, just seed money. For these guys, that's peanuts. But read this article. And they have finally agreed to, we need conversation, and we don't have it. And I need to shut up so I can hear an academic, one of my favorites here, Dr. Purnell, who has spent time and time in the great big supercomputers out there at Washington University. He's a data man, and I react from data. And he has the 360 problems.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
360 degrees, from education through everything. I hope it works. I've waited a long time, 78 years. Good luck.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. And now, Rich, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, Jason, you have a hard job now to fulfill that charge. Well, thank you for your thoughtful contributions. Thank you for the heartfelt personal stories. It's very important for us as commissioners. It's very important for us as a community to hear from each other, to hear what affects lives personally, individually, what affects us all collectively. And we are very grateful that folks are willing to get up in front of a group like this and talk about their story and help us learn. So I echo Starsky's comments in that regard. We're going to shift to, as Starsky said, a discussion here, and we have some great panelists. We are fortunate that Commissioner Felicia Pulliam and Commissioner Pat Sly have agreed to co-chair this working group, and so they're going to set up this discussion, and then they're going to set up our three speakers that are here tonight. So we appreciate Ray Boshara from the Federal Reserve Bank, Jason Purnell from Washington University, and Lara Granich from Missouri Jobs for Justice to join us here tonight. We think you'll learn from them, as we will, and then after that we'll have the opportunity to break into working groups to talk about what we're hearing and your thoughts as well. So we'll start with Felicia and Pat. Who's going first? Oh, okay, excellent.
Moral support. Pat's here for moral support. Good evening, everyone. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Pat and I are honored that we've been asked to lead this charge around the work looking at economic inequality and opportunity. We've already had great testimony to help us understand why this is such an important topic. We appreciate you being here and ask for your continued engagement and support. So the charge of our effort is to outline the root causes and make sure that we pay attention to the considerations and far-reaching consequences of income inequality and deep poverty in our region as a basis for program development and potentially designing or identifying some legislative action that can affect policy for positive change. We're looking to leverage research. You'll hear a lot of that tonight. Looking towards the expertise in our area, more learning from the community. And actually, if we find that there are some gaps in our learning, to fill that with research and data. But we'll be looking at for actionable, sustainable, real, transformative ways that we can improve the economy and engage everyone. So I'm going to get out of the way so you can hear from these experts. I am thrilled and excited to be doing this work and to be learning along with you. And the people that you'll hear from today, I've been watching their work for quite some time, and was with Jason just last week, so I'm a fan as well. So Jason Purnell is going to bring to us the work of For the Sake of All. It's a multidisciplinary project on the health and well-being of African Americans in the St. Louis region. The first phase of it culminated in May of 2014, and this is the second phase, the community engagement, where he gets out and he shares with us all of the information that he has and helps us understand why, even if you're not African American, you should pay attention to this issue and how it impacts you and how it impacts the economy of our region. So what we're going to do is watch a little film about a little girl named Jasmine.
The research reflected in the For Sake of All report examines the intersection of circumstances and outcomes. Let's simplify these complex issues by looking at one little girl's life. We'll call her Jasmine. What if Jasmine is born to college-educated parents who have stable jobs and income? Let's call this path number 1. They start saving early for her future, and in this case, she also benefits from healthy food options and safe places to play. She attends a high-quality early childhood education center. She grows up in a nurturing environment, exposed to many fun learning activities and opportunities. But let's take a look at another path. Path number 2. In this scenario, Jasmine is born to a single mother working 2 jobs. She's struggling to make ends meet, which makes spending time reading to and interacting with her daughter more difficult. Their neighborhood lacks safe places to play and also fresh and healthy food options. Jasmine stays with her grandmother during the day, spending many hours inside. Her grandma loves and watches all her grandchildren, but she lacks the resources to do learning activities. She's also limited by her own health problems. The research tells us the subtleties in Jasmine's story matter. She's already been impacted by her circumstances before she even gets to the first grade. Speaking of school, back on path number 1, Jasmine's school district has many resources like state-of-the-art technology, tutoring, and college counselors. Jasmine and her classmates expect to attend college. In her other life, Jasmine is still intellectually curious. She wants to attend college but receives little guidance. There's also no savings account to help her pay for it, and she lacks basic financial education. She suffers from health problems that make it more difficult to learn in school. As we'll see later, these divergent paths will continue to impact Jasmine's future. But what are the solutions? Remember the little girl we met earlier as an example? Well, let's say Jasmine is all grown up. The data tells us that the factors we saw impacting her childhood still continue to affect her into adulthood. Let's revisit her on path number 1. After college, Jasmine finds a job working for an engineering firm. It provides her with benefits like health insurance, sick leave, and retirement savings. Fast forward, and Jasmine is able to retire at 67. She spends time traveling and trying new activities. Jasmine also spends time with her family, who will benefit from the wealth she's able to leave behind. What about path number 2? Let's take a look at how Jasmine's other life has played out. Jasmine works in a mall as a sales associate. She works hard but is often worried about losing her job. Her schedule changes often and makes it difficult for her to finish her degree at a local community college. She doesn't make enough money to save for retirement, so in her old age, she still needs to work. Some days, work is very difficult because of her health problems. In this scenario, Jasmine worries that she has very little to leave behind for her children.
So we're going to start with Dr. Boshara from the Federal Reserve, and then Jason, and then Lara. So Dr. Boshara, please.
Who's going to be doing the slides? Can you just click for me? Thanks. There's only a few of them. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. How are you? Good evening. Good. My name is Ray Boshara, and I first of all want to thank the members of the Commission for the invitation to be here this evening. It's a real honor and a real pleasure to do this. I direct something called the Center for Household Financial Stability at the Federal Reserve Bank here in St. Louis. Our job is to look at savings and ownership, people's wealth, what they own, what they don't own, and why that matters for helping them move up the economic ladder, and why that's also good for helping us build the economy. I need to say that these are my own views and not necessarily the views of the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. So it's a pretty hard act to follow, all the folks we just heard here from the community. It's a little intimidating. I am an academic. I do research. But I can tell you this, I've been doing research on one simple idea for 25 years, which is how do you help low-income people, struggling families, build savings and wealth and ownership. That's all I've done professionally for 25 years, nothing else. Most of my time was in Washington trying to get Congress to do something about poor people who did not have wealth. All right, I'm now doing that same work here in St. Louis on behalf of the Federal Reserve. I was really heartened to hear many members of the community talk about not being able to own things, not being able to open up a bank account, the struggles like Danielle to pay the bills and never feeling like she can get ahead. I'm very heartened by those stories. And that's why we're doing this work at the St. Louis Fed. We believe that it's good for families, good for communities, and good for the economy if more families have a stake in the communities in which they live. So my talk today is in 3 parts. It's very brief. The first is why does this matter? Why does it matter if families have savings and wealth? Secondly, some facts about who owns America and who doesn't. And third, some promising ideas that we can build on that the Commission can take under advisement. Some things going on around the country and also right here in St. Louis. So, first slide. I see it's up there already. So, first part, why does it matter if the savings and wealth? I mean, why does it matter if people have savings or wealth? This chart shows very simply and very starkly who owns America. As you can see, the wealth gap dwarfs the income gap. Wealth inequality is a bigger problem, a bigger issue than income inequality. Let me give you just a couple of numbers. First, if you look at the top 10% of the population, all right, they have 50% of the nation's income, but over 70% of the nation's wealth. If you look at folks in the middle, right, they have 30% of the nation's income, but only 12% of the nation's wealth. When you go down to the bottom, 40% of the nation, they have 10% of the nation's income and 0% of the nation's wealth, collectively, all right? That doesn't mean that everybody in the bottom 40% has no wealth, but if you look up the pie, what we own, and you divide it up, these are the numbers. Now, you might think that I'm concerned about the wealth gap. I'm actually not. I'm not really concerned about how much wealth Bill Gates or Steve Jobs once had, okay? But I do care about the 40% that don't have anything. That's the bigger issue. Our task is not to close the gap. Our task is to make sure that folks on the bottom have enough savings and wealth to move their lives forward. Why is it important that they have this? I think it's become pretty obvious, but we've learned from research that when families have savings and wealth, they first of all have more financial stability. If you have a couple of $1,000s in the bank or even a few hundred, you can pay a bill, you lose your job, you have a health emergency, your car breaks down. What's your choice? Go into your savings account or run to the payday lender, right? When you have some assets, you have a little bit of stability in your life. But we also have research showing that when you have some assets, you're going to move up the economic ladder. We have scholars from the left and right showing that even small amounts of savings and wealth can have a big impact on whether or not you move up the economic ladder. It is one of the strongest predictors of whether or not you move up the economic ladder is if you have wealth. And some studies show that it's the strongest predictor of whether or not one opportunity gets passed from one generation to the next. Next slide, please. So we did a little bit more research and well, why is this? Why do we have this huge wealth gap? And it turns out, according to our research, that there are 3 things that predict who has wealth and who does not. Those 3 things are your age or when you were born, secondly, your education, and third, your race or your ethnicity. All right? It turns out from a balance sheet perspective, families are either thriving or they're struggling. Who are the thriving families? Who are the families that are at the top bars, the top green bar, the top red bar, and the top blue bar? They clearly have more wealth. It turns out that middle-aged and older families are doing quite well in terms of wealth. Better educated families are doing quite well. You can see the difference going from less than high school to college to a graduate degree, the differences in wealth. And then the final is African Americans and Hispanics tend to have about 1/10 of the wealth of whites and Asians, all right? So collectively, we call people who are middle-aged or older, who have higher levels of education, and who are white or Asian, we call these folks thrivers. Their balance sheets are doing quite well. Everybody else, which is roughly 3 out of every 4 families, is what we're calling a struggler, all right? They have weak balance sheets. They don't have enough savings. They have too much debt. They probably lost their house during the Great Recession, right? So why is it that they're struggling? You know, what determines who's struggling and who's thriving in this country? Well, it turns out that people who are young, who are less educated, and who are black or Hispanic are already economically vulnerable. But then, on top of that, they take on risky financial choices, right? Or they are presented with very bad choices, whether it's a payday lender or a mortgage that is not really appropriate, right? And so you combine these two things, being already at risk, with taking on the wrong choices on your balance sheet, and your wealth goes right down the tubes. The recession wiped out 2 decades worth of wealth, but it really wiped out the wealth of these struggling families. As a matter of fact, the main problem was that too many families had too much wealth in home ownership, they had too much debt, they had too little savings. And that is the reason why they are still to this day trying to recover their wealth. All right? Next slide, please. I have 2 more slides. So let me share with you 3 surprising facts about wealth, all right, and interesting facts. The first is that these strugglers that I just talked about, well, it turns out that public policy is actually not helping them very much. Tax breaks to build savings and wealth, which total nearly $400 billion a year, offer the fewest benefits to those with the greatest need. The policy is upside down. If you have savings and wealth, tax policy gives you an incentive to have even more. If you don't have any savings and wealth, not only can you not take advantage of tax breaks, if you're on food stamps or Medicaid, you have to spend down your assets, right? It doesn't make any sense, right? That's the first thing that's counterintuitive. It doesn't really make any sense. A little bit more hopefully, however, we have some good evidence. This is my second surprising fact. Even very poor families in experiments, when given the opportunity, have accumulated savings and wealth, all right? That's because they had access to the right products, programs, and policies. You may not believe this, but it was women like Danielle in our experiments who were struggling and raising kids who were able to make sacrifices and save and build wealth. Why? Was it because they lacked ability? No. Was it because they lacked the willpower? No. It's because they lacked opportunity. No one put an opportunity in front of them that made it possible for them to clean up their credit, right? To learn how to budget, to learn how to save, right? When you take that idea and you situate it in the poorest, struggling communities, low-income people, like anybody else, can save and build wealth. All right? It was hard. I'm not saying it was easy. But presented with the opportunity, low-income families, even very poor families, could save and build wealth. Our third very encouraging finding, and this is also coming out of research, is that even very small amounts of wealth can have a pretty big impact on the life course. All right? Of course, it's nice to have more, but in terms of changing your attitudes and your beliefs, your hope, you know, your possibilities for the future, it turns out that a few $100s or a few $1,000s can make an enormous difference, right? The few $1,000s or the few hundred that prevents you from going to the payday lender. The few $100s it takes to open up that small business that's going to generate some income, right? The couple of thousand you might need to start at the community college to get that skill, to get that job, or the down payment on the apartment or the car that's going to get you to work, right? Well, it turns out if you get these little infusions of cash or assets at the right moments, it can have a big impact on your life. When you are ready to make a transition in life, do you have a little bit of savings, a little bit of wealth to propel you forward? Willie Elliott at the University of Kansas just found out that if you look at youth, okay, teenagers, youth with a college savings account in their name are 4 to 5 times more likely to go to college than youth who do not have a savings account in their own name. Did you guys get that? 4 to 5 times. You want to know why that is? $10, $50, $100, whatever it is, you know what that savings says? It says, I'm going to college. We expect you to go to college, right? We have hope that you are going to go to college. That savings account embodies hope. Researchers call this the college-bound identity, right? You know, you think you're going to college, so you start to behave differently now, right? That's what a little bit of wealth can do. It's remarkable, really. Another researcher, Tom Shapiro, he's the one who actually documented this idea. You know, he followed 236 African American and white families over 25 years and discovered that the white families, more often than not, and of course some of the black families, you know, they had these small doses of wealth that enabled them to make these big leaps forward on their life trajectory, to start college, to buy a home, to start a small business. You know, and when I talk about these services that are really important, you know, that's happening in communities all over the country, all over St. Louis. Places like Kingdom House, Justine Peterson Housing, Beyond Housing, United Way. There are institutions in communities in St. Louis that are doing what I'm talking about. This is not some pipe dream. They are helping people build their credit, start savings, you know, second chance savings accounts, start businesses, get loans. You know, the things that you've talked about that get you on a path to ownership are happening right here in St. Louis. Last slide. I would like to close with a few what I think are some promising ideas, all right? I'm going to talk about three things very briefly. How to save, what to save for, and when to save, all right? So, how to save, I think I've hinted at this already. Communities are coming together to make savings easier, automatic, and regular, all right? Now, if each one of you had to make a decision to cash a check and walk over to the bank and save, how many of you would save? I know that I wouldn't, okay? You want to know how most people save and build wealth? It's done for them. It's automatic. Some of you have 401ks, right? What happens? They set it up for you, they take it out of your paycheck, they put a match, they invest it, they bundle these saving services. When these very low-income women manage to save, it's because somebody had bundled some services for them, all right? And so we're seeing public-private partnerships, banks and credit unions and nonprofits coming together to put these services together. Again, the key is easy, automatic, and regular. You want to make one decision to save, and then it just happens, all right? What do families need to be saving for? I think it's pretty obvious. Emergencies, as I mentioned. First and foremost, families need liquidity. To pay down debts that don't lead to assets, right? College, retirement, somebody mentioned the dream of opening up a small business, right? And a home at some point, when you feel like you've got the rest of your balance sheet in order, a home can be a great investment, but it's not the right place to start. And let me close then with what to save or when to save, all right? The key is to capture what I call the savings moment, all right? Here is the thing. You have to save while you're doing other things that you would be doing anyway, right? So when you're renting or buying a home, set up a savings account. So in addition to making your rent payment, you start to save a little bit. When you're spending, there's programs out there that either tell you don't spend that money, you should save it instead. You can get these apps on your phone. There are also programs that help you build up a savings account while you're paying back a debt. When you pay your taxes, how many of you get the EITC and have $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 in refund to look forward to? Does anybody? No? Okay. Well, if you're not claiming the EITC and you're eligible, you should, because refunds average $2,000 to $3,000, sometimes $4,000, and that turns out to be an amazing time to save and build wealth. All right? And there's programs out there, including a tax time program here in St. Louis, that is helping people convert their tax refunds into savings. That's another great moment. Another great moment is when you start a job, setting up that retirement account or setting up an automatic savings account into an emergency savings fund. And the administration, the Treasury Department, just came out with something called the MyRA. It's like IRA, but it's MyRA. It is the perfect starter savings account. You can get started with just $25, and you can't lose any of the principal. All right? And I'm going to close on my all-time favorite idea, the one that I think actually could be transformative, all right? That is when a child is born or when a child enters school, they get their very own college savings account, all right? Their very own, All right, just imagine. Now, for a long time, we had to imagine this because it wasn't happening. But we worked in countries and cities, cities and states around the country, even over in the United Kingdom on this idea. Right now, every kid born in the state of Maine gets a $500 college savings account automatically. Parents don't have to do anything, all right? Every kid in the state of Nevada, when he or she enters kindergarten, gets a $50 savings account. People can contribute to that, all right? Every kid in the city of San Francisco gets a college savings account with $50 in it and $100 if you're low income. And right here in St. Louis, thanks to the leadership of Beyond Housing in Pagedale, every kid entering kindergarten in the Normandy School District gets a $500 savings account automatically as part of just being enrolled in Normandy schools. All right? Now, this idea, these kids know that they're going to college. These accounts become a platform for teaching financial basics. The parents and the communities and the banks and the foundations are coming together to make these accounts possible. We have to do everything we can for adults, right? We have to do everything we can, for the folks in this room, for Addison and for Miller and McKinney and for Danielle. They are adults. They are struggling, they are working, they need a little bit of savings, a little bit of wealth to move their lives forward. But we have to take a two-generation approach. While we're helping the adults, we've got to help the kids too. If you want to really change things, you got to make sure that every kid not only has a good education and safe schools, good parents, they also have to have a savings account. And it's my belief that if every kid grows up with a savings account, a little bit of wealth, the prospect of knowing that they're going to go to college, I think then we have a real chance of changing things not only in St. Louis, but also around the country. Thank you very much.
We're going to do questions after all the speakers from the commissioners. Jason, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation to address the commission. I'm going to change this because it's bothering folks.
I don't want you to trip.
There we go. There we go. So it's an honor to be here with you this evening to talk about, very fittingly, Clifton set me up a little bit, American dreams and St. Louis realities. What it means to live in St. Louis, given economic mobility and what we know about economic mobility. I can't hope to match the eloquence of Danielle, but I do want to assure you that none of this is purely academic to me. I was born not too far from here in North Woods. I grew up in St. Louis, and St. Louis means something very special to me. So none of this is purely academic, but I will be walking you through some data. So let's get to it. As this graphic suggests, there are many ways of defining the American dream. But at least one of those definitions includes this notion that each generation should do better than the last. I should do better than my parents, and my children should do better than me. The question is, how good a job are we doing at that? And how realistic an expectation is that, both for our region and for our nation? And that's a question that Harvard economist Raj Chetty and his colleagues sought to answer with a couple of studies on this notion of economic mobility. And I've tried in this graphic to break down what economic mobility means, or at least one way of looking at economic mobility. It's this notion that where you start in childhood, this rung on the economic ladder, you ought to move up that rung. And one of the ways of looking at economic mobility is whether or not starting at this lowest level of income, what are the chances that you actually make it to this highest rung of income? it turns out that your chances are lower if you live in the United States than if you live in other wealthy developed nations of the world. And it also turns out that even though the chances of economic mobility haven't changed all that much over the past several decades, the rungs of this ladder have gotten further apart due to something called economic inequality or income inequality. And what that means is that your starting place matters a great deal more than it used to. In other words, what your parents' economic resources are going to have a much larger determining factor on your outcomes as an adult. So what we're going to do is take a walk through economic mobility. It also turns out that where you live in the United States determines your probability of economic mobility. This is the same kind of probability that we were talking about before, of moving from that lowest rung on the ladder to that highest rung on the ladder. And what this map is showing you is a map of the United States with the highest probability of that happening in this kind of light yellow color, and the lowest probability of that happening in this dark red color. And you can see that the southeastern portion of the United States, also where the highest African American population in the United States is, has the lowest probability of that kind of mobility. And that includes where we live. In fact, of the 50 large metropolitan areas that Raj Chetty looked at, St. Louis ranked in the bottom 10, number 42 for economic mobility. Dr. Chetty and his colleagues were also able to identify factors that were related to economic mobility across the country. So if some of these factors were higher or lower, you had a higher or lower probability of economic mobility. Those factors included the amount of African American population, segregation and income inequality, school quality, social capital, or this notion that there's trust and social cohesion in a community, and family structure. We're going to look at each one of these in turn. But first I want to talk to you a little bit about the project that was introduced earlier, For the Sake of All. Even before Dr. Chetty and his colleagues released their paper, 6 colleagues of mine and myself were working on a project to look at the health and well-being of African Americans in St. Louis, but not just to report on another study of health disparities, to also tie health to these educational and economic factors that end up being very large contributors to health outcomes. And we'll talk a bit about that. But also to determine what the impact of these disparities was on the entire St. Louis community, regardless of your race, regardless of your socioeconomic status. And then to suggest some solutions to how we close these gaps in health and well-being in our region. So what you're going to see in these next few slides is some of Dr. Chetty's data and some of the data from For the Sake of All. So that first mobility factor, African American population. It turns out that St. Louis ranks 10th in terms of the largest proportion of African American population in those 50 large metro areas that I told you about. And African Americans make up roughly a third of the city of St. Louis and St. Louis County combined. Now, I want to give you a caveat here. The geographic area that Dr. Chetty's looking at is actually larger. What we looked at in For the Sake of All was just the city and the county. So I'll make those distinctions as we go through these slides. Roughly 30% of the combined population of St. Louis City and St. Louis County is African American. This is a map of African American population concentration in St. Louis City and St. Louis County. For anybody who lives here, this map is not surprising to you. Orange is the highest concentration, anywhere from 45 to 97% African American. Light blue is moderate, 6 to 44% African American. Dark blue is the lowest, 1 to 5% African American. This is a map of poverty, concentrations of poverty in St. Louis City and St. Louis County. And what I always say when I show this series of maps is notice how the orange stays orange, and the light blue stays light blue, and the dark blue stays dark blue. Orange, again, is the highest concentration, anywhere from 19 to 54% poverty. Light blue is 9 to 18%. Dark blue is 1 to 8%. St. Louis is the 5th most racially segregated of the 50 large metro areas that Dr. Chetty studied. That's in terms of racial segregation. And this map is kind of a stark picture of that. It's the 20th most segregated in terms of income of those 50 large metro areas. So we've got segregation by race, we've also got economic segregation. That third mobility factor, income inequality, which is just the difference between people who have high levels of income and people who have lower levels of income. What we know is that St. Louis has the 29th highest income inequality among the bottom 99% of the population when we looked across those 50 metro areas. And the reason that we look at the bottom 99% is, as Ray just said, we're factoring out the Bill Gates and the billionaires and just looking at that bottom 99%, the regular folks, right? 29th highest income inequality. Whites have more than twice the median income of African Americans in the city of St. Louis and St. Louis County combined. And that's for the sake of all data. And this is just showing you the numbers. It's actually more than twice in the city of St. Louis, a little less than twice in St. Louis County. Median income, just as a refresher on your statistics, is the exact midpoint where half the population has more, half the population has less. That fourth mobility factor, school quality. This is a map of high school dropout in St. Louis City and St. Louis County. Again, where the orange is the highest, anywhere from 8 to 20%, light blue is 3 to 7%, dark blue is 0 to 2%. 1 in 10 African American 9th through 12th graders dropped out of school in 2012. St. Louis ranked 20th out of 33 cities that reported and had full data in terms of high school dropout, even after we control for parents' level of income. And it ranks 15th of 48 for teacher-student ratio at about roughly 17.2 to 1. So slightly better on that ranking. Dr. Chetty and his colleagues used religiousness and rates of violent crime as indicators or markers for this notion of social capital or social cohesion. St. Louis has ranked 20th of the 50 large metro areas in terms of the percentage of the population that identified as religious. But it ranked 14th out of 46 cities or metropolitan areas reporting crime data in terms of the rate of violent crime. And what we reported in For the Sake of All, and what you can see in this graphic, is that African Americans have a homicide death rate that is 12 times that of whites in the city of St. Louis and St. Louis County combined. And finally, the last mobility factor was family structure. St. Louis has the 11th highest rate of children being raised by single mothers of the large 50 metro areas, and 65% of African American households with children under the age of 18 are headed by single mothers in St. Louis City and St. Louis County combined. And our charge, and for the sake of all, was really to look at these social and economic factors and tie them to a set of health outcomes. And what I'm about to show you is one of the most stark comparisons that we made in our final report. This notion that these economic realities aren't just about mobility. They aren't just about our gross regional product and how many jobs we're producing. They're actually a matter of life and death. What people have really kind of honed in on in what we reported is what is an 18-year gap in life expectancy between a child born in 63105 in the Clayton area and a child born in 63106 in North St. Louis City. This is a distance of less than 10 miles in our region. 18 years gap in life expectancy. And what we know is that 63106 is 95% African American versus 63105, which is 9%. We know that 63106 has 6 times the unemployment rate of 63105. We know that 63106 has almost 8 times the poverty rate of 63105. And we know that a household in 63106 has roughly 1/6 the median income of 63105. This is the geography of inequality in our region. When you just look at the income distribution of African Americans in the city of St. Louis and St. Louis County combined, you see that 44% of African American households are subsisting on less than $25,000 a year in the city and the county combined. And a majority, 58%, are living on less than $35,000 a year. We also reported, and for the sake of all, over 3 times the rate of poverty for African Americans in St. Louis City and St. Louis County combined, and nearly 4 times the unemployment rate. African Americans have nearly 4 times the unemployment rate of whites in St. Louis City and St. Louis County. And my dear friend Rebecca Bennett noted, in a way that I hadn't looked at our data, that if you look at the unemployment rate that we reported in our final report, you've got Great Depression level unemployment among African Americans, while whites are sitting at roughly 6% unemployment. So you talk about, Clifton talked about a tale of 2 cities, a tale of 2 wallets. You have one population living in the Great Depression and another population recovering from the Great Recession. And in another stark set of data that we reported, we noted that 1 in 6 deaths among African American adults 25 years or older was attributable to poverty or having less than high school education in a single year. And just for context, for us in St. Louis, that's enough lives to fill 7 Metrolink cars, and it has an economic impact of $3.3 billion. So even though we should care about shortened lives, we also need to note that this is costing everybody. This is costing our entire region. We have recommendations in 6 major areas for how to close these gaps. First, investing in quality early childhood development for all children. And the quality is key there. Not just early childhood, not just daycare centers, but high quality early childhood. Every dollar we spend on high quality early childhood returns $7 to society. Some estimates as much as $17. And we know that children who've been exposed to high-quality early childhood intervention 30 and 40 years later have better health outcomes. They're at decreased risk for things like diabetes and heart disease. I say all the time that there aren't many things in social science for which I'm prepared to say that the jury is in. The jury is in on early childhood development. Helping low to moderate income families create economic opportunities. And I'm glad that Ray brought up child development accounts. One of our recommendations, and we're going to get this done for St. Louis, are universal child development accounts for every baby born in St. Louis City and St. Louis County. $500 child development accounts for every baby, with a progressive structure where children who are below the poverty line will receive booster contributions so that every child grows up knowing that we are investing in their future in the St. Louis region. Investing in coordinated school health programs where children spend most of their day. There ought to be health care. There ought to be coordinated efforts around their health within schools. Investing in the full range of mental health, from awareness and screening to treatment and data collection about the prevalence of mental health conditions. Investing in quality neighborhoods no matter where you live. It ought to be possible to buy fresh fruits and vegetables. You ought to be able to walk safely in your neighborhood. You ought to be able to access resources like banks that give out loans for housing. And coordinating and expanding chronic and infectious disease prevention and management, which means that when your doctor takes your vital signs, he or she is also asking, do you have a job? Do you have a place to live? Do you have enough to eat? And connecting those resources between communities and clinical settings. We're partnering with Focus St. Louis in our second phase of work on a set of discussion guides and action toolkits based on the work that we've done. We released the first set back in October, and perfectly enough, it's on creating economic opportunity. And our action toolkit walks you through, as a community member, what are the things that you can do? Everything from educating members of your network, to advocating in Jefferson City, to donating your time and your resources to people on the ground like Jobs with Justice who are working on economic opportunity. Everything for the Sake of All is at forthesakeofall.org, including the 5 briefs that we released between August and December of 2013, the final report that we released in May of 2014, those discussion guides and action toolkits that I just talked about. I should note that there are also youth versions of both the discussion guide and the action toolkit as well. You can email us for more information at forthesakeofall@woostel.edu, and you can now follow us on Twitter